First of 4 webinars on motivational interviewing and is sponsored by the Utah Department of Health using funds from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Wise Women program. Just a reminder there, if you have questions, please use the questions drop-down box and submit your questions in that section. And we are pleased to have with us today Nathan Arce, who is a licensed clinical social worker. Mr. Arce has a bachelor's degree of Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and a Master's of Social Work from the University of Utah. Nathan is skilled at designing and providing training to practitioners on implementing motivational interviewing strategies in clinical and therapeutic settings. And I'm going to turn the time over to Nathan at this time. And thanks again for joining us, Nathan.
All right, thanks. Well, I'll just real quick. Again, my name is Nathan Akery. I'm glad to be with you guys today. Before we start into this, I'd just like to say, I love motivational interviewing. It's something I use in my private practice. Done it for quite a few years now. It's a great skill, and it works with a variety of client populations. Not just mentally ill people, but health settings. It works great with school kids, with adults, with yourself. And I think probably by the time we get done with this, you're going to see how practical this is and how easy it is to use. Now, I worked in conjunction with Dr. Brad Landau up at the University of Utah, and he and I have come up with these presentations. And so most of these slides he and I have created, although some of them are from William Miller, who's actually the founder of motivational interviewing. So we've kind of used a lot of his stuff as well. Now, just as kind of to get you into this, motivational interviewing is an approach designed to help you motivate your clients to change. So that's obviously what we're trying to do here. Now, the nice thing is there's a lot of research that supports motivational interviewing, and it says that it works with a wide variety of problems. It's very evidence-based. It certainly it had its roots in alcoholism and drug abuse and was used with that population, but it's spread out now to work in the medical population and just, again, a variety of populations. Now, like other approaches designed to help people change, it's not the silver bullet. It's not going to cure everybody, but it's a great place to start working with somebody, and it's a great place to get them going to start making their own changes. Now, one thing that you can do is my hope is when you leave, or when we end this webinar today, you're going to have some skills you can actually use today. You can start using some of these things today. That's really the best way to do this, is to start practicing right away. The more you do this, the better you're going to get. So let me kind of tell you a quick story about that kind of illustrates this motivational interviewing. So, I was on a river rafting trip a while ago, and we had this guide, and he was showing us, again, how to get down, this particularly steep bit of rapids. Now, when I looked at this, I thought, okay, there's no way I'm going to flip this boat. I don't have the motivation to do this. This water's cold. This is dangerous. And so this guide, he said, okay, first, he told me how to do it. Okay, make sure you don't grab onto the walls of this canoe. Make sure you paddle this way. Make sure, you turn the boat this particular way as you go into these rapids. Then he said, now watch me, I'm going to do this. And so he went down, and we saw him do it, and that increased my confidence, and I started to say, okay, this is probably something I can do. And so right after that, I emulated him, and we got through this little bit of rapids, and I didn't flip the boat. And the point of that little story is to say, what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be telling you how to use these motivational interviewing tools. Then I'm going to be showing you, I'll be talking about it, and then my expectation is that you're going to go out and do some of this stuff. Because again, the only way to learn this stuff is by actually practicing and doing it. So kind of our format, like I said, the applications for practice here, there's a lot. You can be doing this with clients that you sit down and talk to. You can be doing this with family members, with friends. I mean, with really anybody you work with, motivational interviewing is going to have an application. Now, the big concept here to take into consideration is that what we're doing here is we are learning to dance, not wrestle with our client. And real quick, obviously dancing, when you dance with somebody, you're moving with them, you're working in concert with them, and again, if you ask my wife, dancing with me certainly has a bit of embarrassment to it, but again, when you dance with somebody, you're moving with them, it's a coordinated effort. Now, versus wrestling, when you're wrestling with somebody, you're trying to beat them into submission, in other words, or you're trying to make them do something. And motivational interviewing, again, is about that concept of dancing. We're really working to move with somebody, not force them into doing something. Because, again, anybody that probably any of us, when you've had somebody try to force you to do something in life, it just doesn't really work out too well. Typically, we don't respond to that. Now, as we think about this, oh, we're having a little bit of computer problems here. It's not advancing. There we go. Okay. So I want you to think, kind of ask yourself this question as we go along. What do you like most about working with the clients you have? And again, there's got to be some things you like there. You know, every client's going to have a little different take to it, but I'm sure there's some things that you really like working with the clients you have, the population you have. Now, at the same time, maybe even write this down on a piece of paper, is what do you find most difficult about working with this population you're with? Now, again, as I understand it, the population you're working with are people who are trying to get help and changing, and trying to get help and changing their health, their patterns of healthy living and eating. And so again, take that into consideration. Think about these things, because this is going to come up as we go through this training. You're going to be using these principles to apply to this population. So a definition, we're going to kind of move forward on what motivational interviewing actually is. So like it says here, motivational interviewing is a person-centered directive method of communication for enhancing a client's own motivation to change by exploring and resolving ambivalence. And the thing I kind of draw your attention to here is person-centered. So you kind of think in your mind, what does person-centered mean? You know, this is a very strength-based way of focusing on your clients. You know, it's acknowledging that they have the right to determine their own destiny, that really we're there to help them. You know, that's kind of one of the biggest things. And like the bottom of that paragraph says, motivational interviewing draws on the theory that people are more likely to commit to a change that they have voiced. So again, part of this technique is getting people to talk about the change themselves. So you're not the one talking about it, they are. So again, when we say something, it's a lot more powerful. You know, and a big part in this first webinar we're doing today is going to be focused on how do you draw out change talk. So hopefully by the end of this training, you're going to have a really good idea of what that is, what change talk is, and how you pull it out in people and get them to, you know, start talking about it. You know, motivation is the probability somebody will enter, continue, and adhere to a specific change strategy. So again, it's getting them to do something. You know, the nice thing is if people are motivated, you can usually predict how successful a client's going to be based on their motivation. Not always, but it's usually a pretty good determination. If you've got a very motivated client, they're likely going to be a lot more successful. You're also arousing in them a sincere desire for something different. Now, let me talk about this for a second. If you think about if you don't want something, you're going to probably fight it. You're not going to go after it, and likely you maybe even might in your mind do what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you say, this isn't something I want to do, I'm not going to be successful in this, I don't really want this. Because again, desire, which we're going to talk about later on, is an emotional response. And typically our emotions, again, are very powerful, but they're oftentimes irrational. And so, again, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to prick that emotion in them in a good way to get them to actually want this change. Because if they don't, again, they're going to dig their heels in. They're not going to want to do much. Now you want to look for what you can do for the client, focus on what's important to them. Again, this goes back to that person-centered concept. We want to make sure that it's something that they want. Again, one of the best things to do is you get a hope in them. You know, I know, again, whenever I'm working in therapy with people, you know, the very first conversation I have with them is I talk to them about what their hopes are, if they'll change, if things will be different. And I try to have hope myself, because, you know, there's been a lot of studies. I was reading a study recently about, you know, how much having hope that something's going to be successful really helps determine kind of the end goal of things. And so again, if you can start from the very first, getting your client to have a hope that things are going to be different, you're going to be a lot more successful. You know, and then like it says there, you got to put your own wants aside. Don't make it about you. If you do, you're not going to get real change. So don't let your pride get into this, and kind of stay away from that stuff. So now the goals here are ultimately, first, we want to give you the ability to increase your client's motivation to change. Obviously, that's kind of what this whole thing is about. It's about that motivation piece. Now we're going to talk a lot about how do we reduce resistance, and that's going to be probably our second webinar. You know, I'm going to give you some specific tools, very specific tools that you can start doing to overcome resistance and really roll with it. It goes back to that concept of dancing. We're going to work to increase our client's confidence. Now, confidence is a really important factor, and we'll probably be hitting that on the third webinar here, but if you just think about it, you know, if you've been trying to quit smoking and you've quit, attempted to quit 4 or 5 times and not been successful. Well, how much confidence are you going to have that you're going to quit time number 6? Probably not a lot. And that's something we have to be aware of, because confidence, again, is going to affect motivation, and it's going to affect people's desire to keep working on something. So we want to attend to that. Again, that's something we'll talk about, give you some tools with that. We want to develop collaborative change plans. So again, that's going to be us working with the client and helping them determine their own destiny, again, with a little bit of guidance from us. Oh, we're just having another computer problem here. There we go. We want to strengthen the working relationship with clients, and again, that's the nice thing about motivational interviewing. This is the thing I love with it, is that it really helps the clients feel like you care, and ultimately the hope is that you do. I know, again, I've been using this so much that it's really been incorporated into just the style I interact with everybody. But certainly when I'm working with a client, my very first things that I go to are some of these motivational interviewing concepts, because it's a great way to establish a really good working relationship with your client, so that they really feel like you're an agent of change in their life, when really you're empowering them to be that person. But again, it's a great way to start things out. So I'm going to give you a little sneak peek here of what these skills look like. And again, learning to motivate others is a skill, and anybody can learn it. So everybody that's listening to this, you can learn to do this better, but you got to practice. I remember when I started doing this, quite a few years ago, I had a little cheat sheet. I had a little piece of paper I took around with me, and the first few times I did it, I felt really dumb, because I was reading right off this piece of paper, but nobody knew that. They didn't know what was going on. And as I did this more, I got better, I got more natural, and just got a lot easier. So I'd encourage you, today, like I said, I'm going to give you a couple tools to start practicing. I'd say write them down, have them on a Post-it or somewhere that whoever you're working with can't see, and just read it word for word. It's a great way to start. Now this next slide, I'm going to show you an example of how we use motivational interviewing here. So we've got this statement here. So your client says to you, I know I need to exercise more, eat better, and take my medications regularly, but I don't have the time, money, or transportation. I can never do it. Again, this is probably something a lot of us have heard. So just think, again, how would you normally respond to this? Well, years ago, probably my first response would have been, well, get to it, come on. Don't you have, how much, can you borrow money from your sister? Can you, get a ride off somebody? Can you take the bus? Come on, you can get this done. And, that probably would have been my first inclination. Now, as we look at this talk, we're going to break it apart here. What we've got here, the green, that's the language we want to respond to, not the red kind of stuff. And I'll kind of go over this here. So we've got two types of language here. We've got the change talk, or the forward momentum language, which is the green. And then we've got the status quo talk, or the backward momentum language, which is the red. We're going to respond differently to change talk and status quo talk, and we want to be thoughtful in how much attention we give to both. So again, we're not going to ignore them. We're going to attend to both of them, but we want to put more, obviously, into that change talk. Now the goal here is to increase that change talk, but at the same time honor and minimize that status quo talk. Again, we don't want them going into that, because the more they focus on that red talk, well, the more they're going to give you reasons why they can't change, why things are just too hard. So in thinking that, again, some of the responses you might give would be things like, oh, well, tell me about why you need to exercise more. Oh, you talked about eating better. What does that look like? Or why do you need to take your medications more? Again, you get them talking about that green talk. That's, again, the thing that we want them to go on. Now, again, you think if we respond just to that status quo talk, like I said, and you think, okay, well, so why don't you have the time? And after you ask that, they're going to give you a whole bunch of reasons why they don't have the time to do this. The same thing with money. Why don't you have transportation? Oh, well, because my car broke down, and my sister won't give me a ride, and I don't like taking the bus. Okay, already when they start answering that way, they're in their mind working it up to, yeah, I don't want to make this change. I don't want to do this. So again, we want to avoid that. And motivational interviewing is going to help us do that, is to get better at recognizing that change talk, that green talk, so we get them going in the direction we want them to go to. So here are some example responses. The first one here, And this is the not good, the bossy lecture know-it-all, like I said, and probably all of us have been here at some point. The listen, you just need to get it done. You have the exercise plan I gave you, and you had some little spelling errors there, I apologize. Yeah, the diet plan that I gave you several times. You won't ever be healthy if you don't get things done. Again, you respond that way, likely you're not going to, number one, think that your counselor or your caseworker or whatever you are is very invested in you, and you're going to feel like it's a lecture, which most people don't respond too well to. So again, try to avoid that. I know there's some times when we have to give them that, but it's something we want to avoid. Now the better way is reinforcing that change talk, like we said, is focus on the why. The importance of, well, why do you need to change? Why is it important to you? That's going to draw out that change talk. And when you do that, again, they're going to respond much better to you. Oh, well, I need to change because X, or I need to change my diet because I know it's unhealthy, or it costs a lot of money to eat out, or it's affecting my health. Whatever, you're going to get that kind of talk you want. Now, the moderately good talk, is it can be empathetic, but you have to be careful because it will reinforce that victim stance. And like you see there, the example I wrote, I'm sorry you don't have money or time, tell me about that. Again, it can be a good way to get some empathy with a person, but ultimately it's probably going to get them back into saying why they are a big problem, why things are not going well, or why there's issues. So we want to avoid that if we can. So let's give you another example here. So I'll read over this. It says, things are just so messed up. I'm a wreck. I miss my kids and know they want to see me, but I don't want to burden them. I can't tell them because I'm sure they're sick of helping. So take just a second there. I want you to think, what's the green talk? What's the red? What do we want to attend to? What do we want to avoid? Now, hopefully, you got it right. And again, that green talk, I know I need to exercise more, eat better, and take my medication regularly. That's our forward momentum talk, our change talk. And then the red talk is but I don't want to burden them. Again, reasons why they don't want to do something. I can never do it. I don't have the money, transportation, all that. Again, this is the status quo talk that we just want to stay away from if we can. That's going to get them back into that victim stance, which is exactly where we don't want to go. And again, you can get more resistance from people if you start to talk on that red talk, that status quo talk. They're going to start giving you all sorts of barriers, why they can't do what they're doing. Again, if it might be easy to be, well, why don't you want to burden your family? Oh, well, because they're busy. They've got their things to do, whatever. Again, you probably get the point. So we want to get better at avoiding that. Again, we're going to talk about specific ways you can get better at identifying that change talk. So now let's kind of think about this concept of change. So kind of to yourself, think about what kind of changes do you want your clients to make. And again, this is going to be varied depending on the population you're serving. Some of the things that I just thought of, are first maybe personal, personal change. Maybe they want them to make some kind of family change, in their dynamics, the person they're around or the people they're associating with. A social legal issue. You're trying to get them to change something like that. Or an occupation. Again, probably got a whole bunch of things. Health, obviously, is the last thing I thought of. But again, think about what is it that I am trying to get my client to work on. Now, kind of keep that in mind. And you would think that having a heart attack would be enough to persuade a man to quit smoking, change his diet, exercise more, and take his medications. Again, we would think that. The hangovers, damaged relationships, auto crashes, memory blackouts would be enough to convince a woman to stop drinking. Again, doesn't happen. The very real threats of blindness, amputations, other complications, again, would motivate people to change. Why don't? Again, that's kind of the question we're asking here. And the time spent in prison, again, would dissuade people from reoffending. You look at our prison population, which I work with a lot, and again, that threat of jail oftentimes doesn't make people change. So you think, well, why don't people change when they've got these very big things, that probably would make most of us, or most people, I guess, outside the situation think we should change. And, the question often I come to is ultimately we as people are kind of lazy. And change is hard. once we start doing something, we get kind of comfortable in our dysfunctional ways. It's those patterns or the ruts that we get stuck in. Most people don't, it's hard work to get out of that. And even though it's discomfort or painful to be doing these things or be risking these things, again, we get used to it, and most people get kind of happy with it. And, again, our brains like patterns, and so we kind of stick to them. So, getting people to change sometimes can be really difficult. So the question we need to ask ourselves, again, is why is it important for your clients to change? And again, motivational interviewing is really focused on the why of things, not the how. The how is a different thing. I can tell you how to do something pretty easily, but it's that why that really makes us do something. The big thing here is you got to think you can't make this about you, and that's a lot of times the trap we fall into. Is we think, well, why should this person change? Well, to me, it's important. This was a number of years ago when I was just a brand new social worker. I was at this pretty, run-down house in Midvale, and I'm, knocking on the door, doing a child abuse investigation. And at the time, again, I was working as a CPS worker, and this woman opened the door and starts talking to me, and she's standing in, I don't know what it was. It looked like somebody had thrown up or smashed food in the carpet or something, and she's standing on her bare feet on this, whatever it was. And the whole time I'm trying to talk to this lady, and I'm thinking, you're standing in something disgusting in bare feet. And to my mind, I think, okay, there's no way I would do that. What's going on here? To her, there's no big deal. And I even asked her, you recognize you're standing in something gross. Oh, don't worry about that. It's just smashed in the carpet. It's not a big deal. And I bring up that example. It always stuck with me because I thought, well, what's important for me oftentimes isn't important for clients. They see things in a different way. And this is probably, you can apply this to anybody, is that different things are important to different people. And so we have to be aware of this as we work with people. So again, that question of why do people change? Again, there is a million reasons why people change. Again, it's going to be different for every single person. So as we move forward, we need to keep this in mind. Again, this is kind of the heart of motivational interviewing is, it's not your job to tell people why they should change, but it's your job to help them figure out why they should change. Because again, once people start to know why they should change, they're going to be more motivated to do it. So what I want you to do here is we're going to take just a minute and take a piece of paper out. And again, I want you to come up with, and probably think specifically to the client population you're working with, what variables influence change, again with these clients, or really anybody. And then write down as many as you can in the next minute. So just take a minute to do that, and we'll kind of see what you guys come up with here. All right, so let's see what people came up with. So if you could, and I don't necessarily understand the technology of this, but type in what you came up with, what people came up with if you can. I'll just, while we're waiting for that, I'll kind of show you some of the ideas I came up with. So these are the things that I thought of. Health concerns. I don't know if, again, anybody types anything specific in there, they're going to read it to me. Time, that's a great one. Absolutely, I think time's a huge one because, again, family life, absolutely. Kids, working out, balancing between things. Money, absolutely. That's one of the biggest factors, I think, to a lot of stuff. Transportation, absolutely a huge one. Getting around, that's really tough if you've got a client who doesn't, have transportation. Home life, that's another great one. Don't know what to change. Yeah, oftentimes people don't know where they need to start. What do they do? Those are some great ones. And again, and I think all those things apply to this population you're working with. But some of the things I put on there, looks like it mirrors what you guys did. Again, hope for something better, want of something else, a better life, pressure from other people. Again, I think that's oftentimes, and we'll talk about the stages of change here in a second, but pressure from the outside a lot of times is the first place people start. Current life is uncomfortable. I just don't like things. Or to get something sometimes. So we're going to look at this little formula here. So many models of change assume that if you know something, you'll do it. So if I know it, I'll do it. And I think that's a huge falsehood because you think, I've got an In-N-Out burger right next to my office now, and I'll tell you, when that In-N-Out burger got there, I was over there probably every day. I knew, I had the knowledge that eating In-N-Out burger 2 to 3 times a day wasn't good for me, but I still did it again, and my motivation was pretty low. And I think we have to acknowledge that with a lot of the people we work with, or even ourselves, that just because you know something doesn't mean you're going to do it. And this, if you look at things like, you're supposed to drive the speed limit. Well, how many of us drive the speed limit all the time? You're supposed to wear a seatbelt. Now, hopefully everybody wears a seatbelt. But again, knowledge doesn't mean, like we said here, that there's going to be action. What motivational interviewing says is, it's knowledge times the motivation, and that's where the action comes. So again, if somebody's motivation is 0, we're not going to change. Just like when that In-N-Out burger came in, I had no motivation not to eat it. I was excited. I had never really had an In-N-Out burger, and they were cheap and pretty good, if anybody's ever had one. So again, when somebody's just asking if some of these slides will be available, I'll make sure to give a copy to the people here so we can get that out. So kind of moving forward, as we look here, if there is a will, there's a way. So, we need to, oftentimes we get really tuned into that knowledge and skill piece, or even the resource component, and less tuned into the role of motivation and confidence. One of the things we do the best in helping our clients is figure out, how. Again, most of us are pretty good about figuring out how they can get things done, but we rarely ask them why. Look at that motivation. And so here's an example. So let's say a client's at risk of getting diabetes and they don't change their diet. Your client loves drinking Dr. Pepper every day, and we'll use the In-N-Out burger, going to In-N-Out burger every day. So what's the problem here? Well, you've told them they need to change their diet. They know they need to change it, but again, if they don't have much motivation to stop drinking so much soda and eating fast food every day, then again, they're probably not going to be too successful. So motivational interviewing is designed to help us stay tuned to that why part. Again, really that motivation, why they should change, why it's going to be important to them. So just keep that in mind. So there's a lot of factors involved in that change process, and everybody, the answers you guys provided and the head up on here were some great starts there. But that first thing is knowledge. So, even though I just got done saying knowledge is not the best thing around, but certainly we need knowledge. And people don't change if they don't know how to do that or what's there. So, we want to make sure that people have the knowledge. The next thing is skill. This is going to be the applied knowledge, how they use it. So, this, for an example, if I ignore my son when he whines, then I'm reinforcing that he can whine and it's not going to work, but if I respond to him every time he whines, then again, his knowledge is that, oh, if I whine, Dad'll do what I want to. Just a little example I was thinking about this morning as far as that skill and applied knowledge. Confidence, now that's that sense of efficacy. Confidence is the belief that you're going to succeed if you try to do something. So obviously that confidence, in my example of the cigarette smoking, confidence is going to be a huge thing. And the lower confidence is, the more likely somebody's not going to try it. Their motivation's going to go down. Vision, now this is a really important thing, and we're going to talk about this probably on another day. But this relates to their values. What our clients want from life or expect from life. If we use a driving example, you may know how to drive and even possess the skills to drive safely. But if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to have much vision. You'll never arrive there. So vision includes the client's life goals, their dreams, and often they don't clearly know what this is, or they can't articulate it. And so we really want to help them do this, because this can be a really powerful thing. This is people's long-term goals, or where they see themselves, and oftentimes there's a very emotional component to this. It can really get people moving forward again. Resources. Now, while this is a simple one, it could be anything from a car to having funds to anything like that. It's an important thing. If people don't have the resources to change, well, you may be really motivated to drive to the store, but if you don't have a working car, well, this is not going to really work out until you get that car fixed. So the motivation piece, which obviously we're going to be talking a lot about, is, again, and this is a really complex, very in-depth reason, but it kind of comes down again to that desire. On one hand, it gives you the fuel it is the fuel to knowledge and skill. So if we use the driving example, if you know how to drive, you possess the skill to drive but have no motivation, then you're not going to drive. So again, if you think about algebra, a lot multiplied by 0 still equals 0. So ultimately our little formula here is knowledge, or change equals knowledge times skill times motivation. So again, we've got to be careful of that. Now resistance, that's a piece we're going to go a lot into, like I said, in the future. In resistance, it's the last ingredient here. And if we again go back to our little algebra formula, that resistance, if that's really high, again, that's going to be, so I guess let's use some math here. So if we have A equals B, but C is lower than A, and so regardless, so you're dividing it by the C. It doesn't matter what A is. Again, you're going to have a pretty low B. Again, so you can think of that C as the resistance. Again, the thing that we're going to be fighting against. And again, we're going to go into much more in depth about resistance in our next webinar. So there's our little formula. So again, kind of take a second, and ask yourself those two questions. Who's inspired and motivated you in life? Choose somebody. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's motivated you at one time. And then think about what it is specifically they did to inspire you. And this is probably going to be different for each person. Just take a second and think about that. And I know for me, I had a great mentor early on in graduate school, and this mentor, didn't, chide me or tell me I was bad, but often just kind of, when I did something wrong, and obviously looking back, I think, oh, that was ridiculous. I was doing some of these things, but my mentor would just say, okay, here's another way. It was very good about giving me options, and really, in essence, doing this, motivational interviewing was good about the self-efficacy, helping me figure out why I wanted to be a better therapist, and then helped me figure out the kind of tools and skills that I needed to do this. And again, everybody's going to have a little different, but again, when you're thinking about this concept, go back and think in your life, who was the most important motivator for me, and why did I find him motivating? You'll probably find some things that relate to this. Now, and again, you can substitute the word counselor for caseworker or doctor, nurse, health advocate, whatever. But the good news here is that you, as the caseworker or whatever, can motivate your client. Client's motivation and outcomes vary, depending on who they're assigned with. There are certainly, the therapy world, there are some people that work really great with me. There are other people that I can recognize. Our personalities are such that you might be better with this other therapist I work with. And that's really the case with everybody, is that your personality is going to fit better with certain people. Now, our styles that we use, the way that we interact with them, in other words, that can strongly drive up that resistance. You have to be really careful. This is, Obviously if you're very confronting with clients, there's a time and place for confronting, but oftentimes that drives people's resistance up. On that listening, that engaging with them, that's going to pull it down. So ultimately what that means is you are one of the biggest factors to determining your client's motivation. Now, as you start to work with somebody, it is very important that you actually know where they are. Now, some people might be familiar with these stages of change. Petraska and DiClemente came up with these, I think, in 1998 or somewhere around there, somewhere in the 90s. But it's a great way to figure out where your clients are and to then adjust your tactics based on where they are. So we're going to talk about each of these in ways that you can work with people in these phases. So first is pre-contemplation. Now, again, in this pre-contemplative state, your clients, oftentimes they don't even really know there's a problem. They are in denial. They're going to argue with you. They're going to, they're probably there working with you because somebody forced them. Going back to those reasons why somebody changed. Either somebody forced them, their doctor told them they've got to be there, or there's some legal ramifications or something like that. And the things you'll hear them say is, everyone thinks I have a problem. I don't see anything wrong with my behavior. And that's usually, it actually gives you a great place to start, because you say, well, why do you think everybody thinks you have a problem? What's going on there? Here again, the big thing is they don't know what's going on. So a little example I came up with is, I'm only meeting with you because my wife said she would leave me if I don't get a place to live, and I don't want her to go. Again, usually they're going to be there because somebody else is forcing them, or there's some pressure. Now, in this stage, ambivalence is really, really not there yet. And again, motivational interviewing is all about attacking ambivalence. So, the thing here we want to really start doing is building a hope of something else, building that ambivalence in them. And again, kind of going back to some of the behaviors you're going to see in this stage is they're going to argue with you, they're going to yell, they're probably going to deny things. They might be late for appointments, or they might not even show. The kind of statements you're going to hear, oh, people lie about me. I don't have a problem. There's nothing wrong. Again, this is usually the very frustrating kind of clients we deal with. Now, contemplation, here, and this is actually a great place to work with people, but here are the clients, they can at least recognize there's a problem, and that there's something that needs to be changed. They oftentimes discuss the disadvantages or the negative implications that flow from the problematic behavior they've got. Additionally, they might identify advantages that could result from making some kind of change. Typically clients in this stage are not totally sold on change, but they're going to start bringing up reasons why they should change. And that's our change talk that we want to get to. They might explore, what change without, they might not give you any commitment, but they'll start kind of talking about it. And again, ambivalence here is really high. So yeah, like it says, you're going to see people going back and forth. They're going to be torn between the reasons why they should start and the reasons why they shouldn't. Now, the behaviors you're going to see here is, they'll discuss the pros and cons to change. You'll hear a lot of those but statements. Well, I need a change, but, and they'll give you those reservations. The statements might be, I want to change, but it's so hard. Oh, well, I've gotten into a little trouble, and so I'm here to talk to you. My wife, or my husband's forced me to be here, and so, again, you'll get some of that change talk, and you'll hear that ambivalence. That's the thing to remember if people are in contemplation. So again, if you've got people in that pre-contemplation, that's a place we really got to try to push them over into that contemplation stage. Pre-contemplation is kind of a hard place to work with people, but contemplation, great place to be working with people. Now, the preparation stage, here your clients are going to start, they're actually going to be exploring the how to change more than the why. So again, that contemplation, that's going to be our best place to do motivational interviewing with people. Now, the preparation phase, typically people now are convinced why they need to change, but maybe they don't know how. So this is where our how skills actually will come in handy. We got to be aware that a lot of times ambivalence is still going to be around. So there's still a good place where we can use motivational interviewing. Again, your client's going to talk about what life could be like, and again, that's great change talk. Tell me more about that. why is that important to you? Again, you're going to get some good change talk out of them. The resistance has typically gone down, so you're not going to see, they're not digging in their heels so much. They're not going to be fighting you like the pre-contemplative person is. Ultimately, this is a great place to start talking with them about a plan. Now, the thing I always say with a lot of the clients, especially the substance abuse clients that I work with, or people trying to make big lifestyle changes, is that if you stay in that planning phase for more than 30 days, you're back into contemplation. Because preparation is really just a building up to the action phase, which we're going to talk about here. And like I said, that readiness, within 30 days. If within 30 days of stating they want to make a change and coming up with a plan, they don't do it, well, you better go back to, seeing them as a contemplative client and working with them in that way. So action and maintenance are the last two, and these typically, action and maintenance, these aren't clients that we have to give too much attention to because now at this point they're doing pretty good. So in the action stage, they're actually doing something different. They're trying out the changes they talked about in that preparation stage, and here, you may just be really just attending and kind of helping them move through, the little hiccups that come here. Now, one thing to keep in mind, ambivalence always has a role here, and you'd expect ambivalence to decrease here. However, a lot of times this isn't always the case. A common statement you'll get from somebody who's been addicted to alcohol or drugs is, oh, I haven't used for a year or so, I'm not drinking anymore, but I really have a craving for my drug of choice. This person is in the action phase, but they're still got some ambivalence. We have to be aware of that. And so again, with your population, it may be that they're talking more about diet or exercise. And again, well, I've been exercising for the last 3 months, but it just really takes a lot of time. And again, you might get some of that resistance talk from them. So again, they just need support, kind of encouragement. That's what we want to be looking at in this stage. Now maintenance, again, we're not going to talk too much about maintenance because typically maintenance is a phase where, our clients, they don't really need much help from us. This is, we want to keep tabs on them, but typically clients in a maintenance phase have demonstrated that they know what to do to keep things going, and ambivalence here is typically pretty low, or they might not even have any ambivalence at all. Usually they're very strongly committed to change. But, I guess the only ambivalence you might see is they can recall the benefits of past behavior. So, oh, I remember how fun it was to go out and party, or I remember how fun it was to go out and just eat whatever I wanted to. Again, you might hear some of that the kind of language, and when I get clients that do that, I try to quickly bring them back to, okay, well, why though is it so great that you haven't done those things now? What are the advantages? Again, get them back in the positive and get them back in that forward momentum. We're addressing that change talk there. So take just a minute here. So what I want you to do is on a piece of paper, whatever you've got there, write down some examples of what your clients say in each of these stages. And again, pay particular attention to those first 3 because that's where I think it's going to be most critical for us to interact with them. I'm just going to think about that for a minute here. I'll give you just a second. All right, so just kind of keep, and the reason why I want you to write those down is, again, the better you get at identifying these phases, the better you're going to get at using these tools appropriately. So just kind of keep those things in mind. So let's kind of move forward. How do we move people through the stages of change? We've identified where those stages are. We've talked about, what clients are going to look like and what ambivalence is looking like there. Now we need to get better at identifying change talks. Now, I'll just preface this really quickly. This is probably my favorite tool to use with clients. It's one of the easiest things, and in fact, I can't ever think of a time that this didn't work. When I had a client that was ambivalent or they're struggling, I used this specific change talk, and we're going to talk about all of these here. But it's a really great thing to focus on. And again, this is all designed to say, what benefits come from understanding the stages of change and how do we help them guide people. So it's going to be a place for us to understand a person's starting motivation. A lot of times I'll do this at the very first of a session, or the very first time I've met with a new client. So I'll sit down with them, and I do a lot of addiction work. That's kind of my specialty, and so this is huge. When I'm working with people in addiction, is I try to help them figure out, get them thinking about, well, why would they want to be clean and sober? Why would they want to get rid of whatever it is they're struggling with here? So we'll look at specifically some of these. So we've first got the preparatory change talk. So these are the starting things here. So this first thing, desire. Now, real quick, you saw 6 on there. We're going to go to the last 2 in a second. Those last 2, those are actually the most predictive things that people are actually changing. It's going to give the commitment, the taking steps. But these first 4, this is a good place to start with people. And so, how I use this is, again, quite literally, I would sit down with people and say, okay, what's your goal? What do you want to change? Oh, I want to stop drinking, or I want to stop using drugs, or I want to get rid of pornography from my life, or whatever their addiction is. Say, okay, great. We write that goal down. Then that first thing is, then I say, okay, I write the word desire up there, and I say, all right, tell me what desire is. And again, if you think about desire, these kind of statements, they indicate that the client wants something different. And this is the thing to remember. Desire is emotion. So desire talk, it's words that suggest a feeling, that the person wants some kind of change. So again, it's going to have feeling stuff in it. That's the big thing to look at. And oftentimes, I've kind of said this earlier, but the feelings, these are the irrational part of us. This is the part that, again, there's great things that come from feelings, but oftentimes most bad decisions people make is because they were feeling something. Again, then, once they calm down and their rational mind takes over, then they say, oh, okay, that was kind of dumb or whatever. So desire, I usually, again, I sit down with them, say, what's the word desire mean? We talk about it. And I say, okay, tell me what your desire to change is. Usually, again, they're going to give you feeling words. I want to, I really would like to reach this goal, or I really wish, that I didn't have this addiction, or whatever. So that next thing on there, ability. Now, ability, this is specifically speaking to kind of the how of things. So ability statements are going to suggest that your client has the capacity or the skills to actually accomplish something. Now, again, confidence is likely, well, it is linked to emotion, but if you think of your own life, if you were asked to do a backflip while you're skiing and you'd never done one before, probably your motivation to do that backflip would be pretty low. So ability doesn't necessarily stretch into unreality. We're talking more about, what can you actually do if you decide to change? What abilities do you have to make you successful? So an example of ability talk might be, I've quit before, or I kept my diet for a couple weeks, or I can make, in the past I've been regular about my appointments, or I've kept a job for 6 months, or I can probably keep going, or I know I can be kind to the people around me, or be more sensitive, whatever. Again, it's going to speak to a specific ability they have to reach whatever that goal is. Now, right after that, again, I literally write the word reasons up there, and I write each of these words down. And then again, I say, well, what reasons do you have to change? Tell me. Now, reason, again, if you think about reason versus desire, reason is the logical part. This is going to be kind of the antithesis to the desire, typically. It's going to be those very plain rationale for, that fighting for the change, and I'm trying to think of some examples here. I'd be happier if I would, stop, eating unhealthy. I'd be happier if I had lost weight. I'd be happier if I, wasn't smoking 3 packs a day. Again, they're giving you reasons why it would be great to reach that goal. Again, this is that intellectual piece. And I point that out to people. I say, okay, let's look at your reasons and your desires. And typically, if they are really focused on that goal, those desires and reasons are going to be in line. They're going to kind of complement each other. And that's actually the most powerful way to get people to change, is when their heart and their head are saying the same thing. Now, the need on there, a lot of people, you might be looking at that and saying, well, what's the difference between need and desire? Well, again, I'd say there's a big difference. Need is kind of a visceral kind of thing that really, it's a really strong desire. It's more than just an emotion. It is because I am going to die. Quite literally, I will die if I don't meet this change. I will lose my life, or I will, again, lose my family. And need is like I said, it's usually one of the most important things. So it's very similar to reason, because there's going to be emotion there, but there's going to be or I think I should say it's similar to desire, and there's going to be reason there because, again, if you don't stop drinking, you might kill yourself, or if you don't change your exercise habits, again, you're going to keep gaining weight. You might have diabetes. Again, they're going to both be linked, but this is going to be a very strong thing. And so usually this is a great place to go with people. After you've done this, a lot of times I'll revisit this need thing, because usually people's motivation are tied to need. It's tied to why they need to make this change, because it's one of the most important things for them. So kind of some examples I can think of, you'll hear words like, I need to, I have to, if I don't, then, blank, 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 I've got to. Again, it's a strong implication for changing. And usually there's some really strong benefits to it. So after I've kind of written those things up on the board or on a piece of paper, or wherever I'm at, and I've kind of explored that with a client, almost always at this point their motivation is pretty high. And a lot of times what I'll do is, before I do this exercise, I'll talk to a client and just say, well, what's your motivation to reach a goal right now? And they, give me a 1 to 10 answer, and they might say, oh, it's 6 or 7 or whatever. And inevitably, once I do this, it's always 1 or 2 points higher, sometimes drastically higher. So the second part of this is the commitment language here. So commitment language, this is talk that's usually characterized by a clear plan to exercise some kind of particular specific action. You're going to hear a will. That's usually involved in what they say. So an example would be, I will call my probation officer. I won't eat out at In-N-Out Burger every single day. I will look for a job tomorrow. It could also be, I'm going to stop selling drugs, or I promise to make my next appointment with you. Again, it's just that commitment that suggests that your clients, they've resolved ambivalence, and they've determined to make some kind of change. And again, oftentimes commitment language is going to go along with desire and reason. And need talk, but not always. But again, you're going to see that strong intention, like it says. And then taking actions, this one's a pretty simple one, but that just says they're actually doing something. So they're not only walking the walk, or talking the talk, but they're walking the walk as well. So, you're going to see them, saying things like, well, yeah, I called my doctor today. I spoke to that person. It went well. I finished my exercise program for the week, or I started, eating more healthy. Again, this form of change talk, it's going to predict change, but in part, but it's going to tell you that change is actually already occurring. So this is a great thing, and a lot of times this is going to be important for that confidence piece. It's going to help people feel a little bit better that they can actually accomplish something. It's going to, you can show them, yeah, well, look at the steps you took. You actually did something. You were successful. So real quick, again, take another minute. I know we're kind of getting close to time being up here, but if you can, on a piece of paper, maybe just write down, you can do this one of 2 ways. You can either write down some of this talk you'd hear from your clients, or even, write a goal down that you want to accomplish in the next week, and maybe just fill in a couple things about your desire for that goal, your ability, your reason, your need. Again, practice, and oftentimes practice on ourselves, can be a really easy way to get good or get better at doing this. So just take a minute if you can and write some of those things down. All right, hopefully you've come up with a couple things there. And I encourage you, again, if you didn't get a chance to do this process, do it with yourself. It's a great way to kind of start. And maybe even just kind of do some self-evaluation before you start this little exercise. Write down how motivated you are to do whatever it is you came up with in your goal. And then after you are, look, revisit that. And I'm pretty confident that you'll actually feel a little bit more motivated to be more successful. But this is kind of the conclusion of the first part of what we did. So just kind of in review, we talked about, again, what motivation is, and I think, if I was going to sum it up in one thing, it would be that first sentence I had about learn to dance and not wrestle. Again, motivational interviewing, this is a way that we, again, act in concert with our clients. We don't push and shove them around. We're not wrestling them to the mat, trying to get them into submission, but again, we're trying to really work with them. We've talked about some of the tools, in motivational interviewing. We've talked about that it can help you, again, increase your client's motivation to change, reduce resistance, which, again, we're going to talk, our next lecture is going to be all about that. Increasing their confidence, again, that works really closely with motivation. Developing plans with our clients, so again, we are working with them, not against them, and we strengthen that relationship because, again, motivational interviewing is a way to really empathize and get along well with your client. And, we talked about those different stages of change, and so, again, I'd encourage you to maybe review that and go over that and be aware of, those areas to work with them. And, again, particularly that contemplative stage is going to be a great place to work with people. And, it's great to get better at recognizing if you've got a pre-contemplative person that just is really going to be fighting you, or if you've got an action phase person or a plan, preparation, and just figure out where they are and try to adjust your style of working with them accordingly. And then I would say your particular homework, and after every one of these I'm going to give you a little homework assignment. Your particular homework is to use that change talk, the skill we just talked about, use it with a client this week. Or even a family member or a friend or yourself at the very least. But literally write it down on a piece of paper, desire, ability, reason, need, so you can remind yourself of this, commitment and taking steps, and then talk to a client about this. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with the reaction you get from them. But again, explore that desire or that emotional piece with them. Talk about their abilities, and this is their past successes, the good things about them. Go into their reasons, again, the intellectual reasons to change or to get to whatever goal they came up with. Then talk about their need, again, that visceral, that really important kind of life-changing reason, that they want to change. And then go over some commitment, respond to any commitment language you get from them, and then finally talk about the steps they're taking or the steps they can take to start things. So try that out. And we'll review over that. We'll kind of, I think in our next one, hopefully we'll be able to answer some more questions and just see how it went. But I guess just as a final note, does anybody have any questions that they want to type in that I can answer real quick? So if you do, I guess type in. Okay. So I think we're having one of our technical people go see if anybody's typing anything up right now. I know that they had handed out some pre-work for you guys to read over. I'd encourage you to read over that stuff. There's some great things in there that talk about a lot of the concepts we talked about, especially some of these beginning things.
There's no any.
Okay, so we don't have any comments. So.
Yeah, Nathan, there are no questions that are currently posted.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, that ends our first webinar, so
okay.
We'll take up again talking about resistance talk next time.
Okay,
thanks for your time.
I want to thank Nathan for today's presentation and remind everyone that this webinar is the first of 4 webinars on motivational interviewing. The next session is scheduled for October 11th at 9 o'clock. By 11:30 today, each of you will receive a link for an evaluation of today's webinar. We encourage each of you to complete the evaluation. If you would like to receive CEUs for this session, completion and submission of the evaluation is required. And look, you may there will be a link for those of you who have other coworkers who were unable to attend the session today. They will be linked from our website at cancerutah.org. Thanks, and have a great day.